8 years. Paul Meyer was president.
Okay. I want to
And,
hear that.
originally, Roy Baumgartner was the borough manager, and then Bruce Hartman took his place.
Okay, well, before we start that, I
Yeah.
want to, we'll get back into that,
Yeah.
please, but we want to say, have you say your name
Yeah.
and what were your beginnings in Palmyra, and then go on, we'll talk about a lot of different things, including
Okay.
maybe that baseball we were talking about.
Mhm.
Okay, so you are,
I'm Richard Groff. I was born here in Palmyra at 236 North Locust Street, and it seems like I never got too much further than Palmyra, because I've lived here all my life.
and you raised children here?
I have 2 sons, yes. One is in the Boston area, the other is in California.
Oh my goodness, they traveled far from Palmyra.
After college, they went where the job was.
Mhm.
But I was born on Locust Street, and then when I was about, I guess, 12 years of age, I moved from 236, or my parents did, to 252 North Locust Street.
Just right down the street.
Yeah. There was a house, a larger house, and owned by people by the name of Seeger. And my dad was in the electrical business. He got started back in 1927, right after Depression days and so on. He worked for Dolphin Electric Supply in Harrisburg, and of course they ran out of work, and the last job was on the Market Street Bridge, putting the lighting on the Market Street Bridge in Harrisburg. A minister by the name of Frank Garber moved to this area, in fact the first farm north of the Gravel Hill Church. And at that time, Metropolitan Edison Company was expanding their electric lines. And Reverend Garber came to him, they both went to the same Church of the Brethren, and asked if he would be interested in doing the wiring for him, because he knew he was out of work. He said yes he would, but he didn't have the money to buy any material.
Okay.
So Reverend Garber said, well, I'll buy the material if you want to do the work.
So they had no electricity in that farm?
No electricity at that point. And so word of mouth, that's how he got started in business. And he worked out of his home on Locust Street for a while until he moved to 250 Locust Street. Worked out of there for till I was a junior or senior in high school. And then Dr. Hartman, Dr. Samuel Hartman here in town, was our family doctor, and he said to him one time, he said, the Whelan property over on Chestnut Street is for sale. He said, I think that would be an ideal place for you to move in and open a store there, because what had happened, he had put an electric stove and electric refrigerator in our home for Mother, used that as a showroom when he did wiring for people.
Oh my goodness.
And he said there you could have a showroom and so on, and sell irons, toasters, this way. And so that's when he bought the property over there on Chestnut Street.
And that's on the corner of the alley, right?
That's on the corner, yeah. Then of course, sometime later they expanded and put the showroom on the front. And then in 1951, my wife and I were married, he decided he needed more storage space and so on, and built a warehouse on the rear and made it 2 stories so there could be an apartment on the 2nd floor.
Oh, well, that was handy for you.
And so evenings I finished out the apartment. And in 51 we were married and moved in there and lived there for 8 years. But with 2 sons, the alley and so on was no place for playing. And John Slaughter was across the alley and trucks coming in and out there and so. So we decided it's time to build. And that's when we bought the lots down in East Broad Street and built down there and lived there, I guess, about 42 years. before moving out to Lebanon Valley Brethren Home.
Okay, all right, on East
So
Broadton.
that's,
So you've had a long history with Palmyra.
oh
and,
yes, yeah.
That's wonderful. So when your father, that's fascinating that your father was put out all the electric in that
Yeah.
farm. What you said, Med-Ed was expanding. What did they have at that point? Just to the edge of town?
You're right, it was just within the borough here, and then they start moving out. And of course, as they moved out, they needed to have electricians for.
Mhm.
And as I said, that's how he really got started.
And then you, as you went through school and wanted a job, then you
After
decided that was a
school-
good business
After
too.
school, I really struggled with whether I wanted to go on to college or not. And I can still hear Dad saying to me, well, he said, you know, here's the business, it's already up and going, someday it will all be yours. And so,
Were you an only child, or did you have brothers and
I
sisters?
have a brother who was in the business, but he passed, after Dad retired, we took over, but he had health problems, and he died, I guess maybe it's about 8-9 years ago now. But, so that's how things went there.
So you decided. Now, did you have to become like a licensed electrician?
At that point, no, there was nothing like that,
Okay.
you know.
Because I was going to ask that about your dad. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't know if he had to.
No, I don't know how he actually, you know, picked up the electrical trade, but there was nothing like licensing or permits or anything at that point.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us about your. So you were living on North Lincoln Street when you grew up. You went to Palmyra.
Living on
Locust.
No, Locust Street.
Locust Street. Okay.
Yeah.
You went to Palmyra schools. So
Yep.
tell us about your school
Went
days.
to Palmyra High School, and of course played a number of sports there and so on. And it was interesting because Mr. Bolger and his wife, who was the librarian, lived in the apartment on the second floor above our store.
Oh, okay.
And so we got to know them real well through that. But as I said, after school, I really struggled kind of, but the business was up and going, and I guess I couldn't turn Dad down. So of course my brother followed the same pattern.
Well, and you were a very successful business in Palmyra for a number of years.
Yes, we did, I don't know how many, it was over 100 schools and churches we did the electrical work on. At one point, Dad had 7 trucks on the road. And initially...
How far did you travel out?
Well, I remember doing the Hess gas station over in York. And down the other direction, Newmanstown. But we did a lot of the churches in the area here. We did the Trinity. We did the Anvil Library, the Moose Home in Middletown.
And all by word of mouth.
Well, this was after he was in business for a while, and you had to bid on these.
Okay.
So it was a bidding process then.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, after my wife graduated, she was 5 years younger than I,
And when did you what year did you graduate?
45.
45, okay.
She was 5 years younger, and I knew her from church and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But she decided no, she wasn't going on to college either, and came to work for us in the office. And
So it was a real family business.
Yeah, she became Dad's partner in estimating. And we had a unique system. With us living in the apartment in the rear, we had an arrangement of a bell on the door and so on. And so they would go up in our kitchen and work on the table. And if someone came in the store and the bell rang, and then we would go down. Same thing with the telephone. We had the same telephone number as the store. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody.
I know. You never got away from work, did you?
Right. But they spent a lot of time, estimating and so on, working up in our kitchen. And it worked out well.
Real family business
Yeah.
there. Were there a lot, I think there were a lot of family businesses though in Palmyra,
At that
weren't there?
point in time, yes, that was pretty typical.
Yeah.
And I did mention, I think, that back in I forget, not too long after we were married, Ruth Baldwin, who was on the Republican committee here in town.
And her husband had a food truck, because I
Yep,
remember them coming, a meat truck
Yep.
that came to our house
Yep.
when I was there.
She called one time and said, I'm calling you to ask whether you would consider running for borough council. And I said, well, I don't know, and had to think about that a little bit. I said, I guess, you could always lose the election. She said, no, you can't, because you're going to be the only one on the ballot.
Oh, unfortunately, we have that kind of system around here.
yeah.
There aren't a lot of people that want to do
So I said, well, okay. So I was elected in borough council when Roy Baumgartner was borough manager at that point. And then he was succeeded by Bruce Hartman.
that. Okay.
Paul Meyer was the president of council. And others on council at that point were Mark Shealy and Hugh Imboden, Russ Wagner. And as an awful lot was accomplished during that time. Actually, I was on 8 years. And during that time, the Borough Hall moved. We purchased the Legion building and moved back there. During that time, the square, the Offe building was torn down and the square straightened out.
Wow, okay. And this was, what time period was it?
It was
60s or-
8-year time period. Back, it might have been 53, 50, somewhere.
Okay,
there,
so in
I'm
the
not
50s
sure.
into the early 60s,
Yeah.
okay.
The Grant Street Bridge was put in, which was an interesting situation because they did all kinds of surveys and said that would be the most logical place. I had just built a new home on the corner of Broad and Grant Street. And so I can still hear Paul Meyer turning to me and saying, well, Dick, how do you feel about a bridge
Traffic.
going in by your place? And I said, well, Paul, I don't like it, but I'm here representing the residents of Palmyra, not Dick Groff, and so I have to vote for it. And
That's
so,
very
of
noble
course,
of you.
they took part of our property,
Did they really?
but when we bought the property, we bought the 3 lots that were available there, so it wasn't really hurting us too badly.
And you hadn't built right up to that edge.
No,
So that was a good one.
we had a place to park outside the garage before we got out to the street and so on. But, at that point, Spruce Street was expanded also down to Ford. As I said, there was an awful lot took place in that period of time.
Yes,
And,
sounds like a lot of the what do I say, significant things of growth in Palmyra.
Right, that actually changed things here in Palmyra.
Right, exactly.
Then I ran for a 3rd term, but I lost to, I can't quite remember his name, but anyway, about a year after that, I was appointed to the Borough Authority. And I spent 21 years on the Borough Authority.
Now, what does the Borough Authority do?
The Borough Authority managed everything at the sewer plant.
Okay.
And, expansions and any problems, extensions, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
that was quite an experience.
Well, when was it, when Mr. Lehman was here, we were talking about the early days of putting the sewage into
Yeah.
Palmyra. When was that? Was it the 50s then?
It must have been, yes. Albert Bugg was chair of the authority, and that was a pretty trying time, because after the, I only came on after the sewer plant was built and so on in operation,
Okay.
but we expanded it, and I think it took on maybe North Londonderry at that time. Anyway, I got phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. The sewage is backing up in my basement. What are you going to do about it? Well, I knew they were working on it, and there was really nothing I could do except sympathize with the poor people.
Oh my gosh.
But,
This was because of the expansion, that we'd have some
well,
backups, or?
it was an unusual time of rainy weather, of sewer problems, backups, and all that sort of thing. So
We got through that, so that isn't really a big problem anymore. I mean, you don't hear about that as much,
No.
now that you say that.
No, it has not been a problem. And of course, now there'll be some changes there again with Londonderry building the plant and the borough leasing from them instead of the other way around.
Were you involved at all in the real early days of when they decided to put sewerage in Palmyra?
No, I think I only came on after that.
After that, yeah. Because I was asking Mr. Lehman, was there, I guess in the back of my mind, I thought of a dissension, that there was
Oh, yes.
a lot of dissension, those who want it and those who don't.
Oh, yes,
type of
I
thing.
knew there was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And a little of that carried over, but,
So you enjoyed public service then?
well, I did at that point. Now I'm not sure I would be as eager to get involved. Because we had a lot of support. We had some dissenters.
Now this was the 50s and into the early 60s when you were serving. Was there vision, I mean, you did some good changes there, I mean, like the borough getting a larger building and that kind of thing. But was there talk at that time of what growth there would be in Palmyra in the future, and what did they envision at that time?
Yes, in fact, we annexed part of, I think it was back in Padubon Drive and that area.
Okay.
But then it got to the point we couldn't annex anymore because of capacity and so on. And I'm not sure whether there were regulations, but anyway, that ceased.
I know when we were looking to buy in Palmyra about 3 years ago, we were told there were no lots available in the borough.
Yeah.
And everything had been built up.
Yep. And right now, of course, there's a moratorium on sewage. The home probably would expand, but there's,
Oh, I didn't realize that, so
Yeah.
that's keeping them from expanding.
yeah.
And that's until North Londonderry gets a sewage
Correct.
plant. Okay.
Correct.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of changes in
Oh,
Palmyra
my,
through the
yeah.
years,
Yeah. Yeah.
personally
And,
and
pardon?
being a member of council.
Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned your church too.
Yes.
That was a stalwart church. We're talking about the Brethren
Yeah.
Church. Do
Yeah.
you want to tell us anything about the
Yeah.
changes that might have taken place in the church through the years?
Well, there, Reverend Carper, Frank Carper, was pastor there and was practically a free minister, you know. But he built up that congregation because he worked in the bank and he had a lot of contacts, and he taught the men's Bible class, and he was very visionary and motivated people, you know. And so that's when the church grew considerably there.
It was all, in the history that I've read, there was always, the Brethren congregation was always at that same location, right? They just
Correct.
expanded.
Correct. Originally, it was just a little white meeting house.
Okay.
Then they expanded, built the brick building. And then in 1936, They added an addition and put the side balcony on. And then I think it was somewhere around 1950 something is when they put the educational wing on it. Yeah. I can still remember helping to carry boxes of materials when they, back in 1936, when they put that addition on for Dad when we did the work over there.
Okay, so your dad did that work too as
Yes.
well for his church.
Yeah.
That's neat.
But from the time I could almost handle a screwdriver, well, Dad had us busy.
Well, that's good. I believe in that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your stories of Palmyra. Is there anything else that we might have missed that you want to share with us?
I don't think of anything just off the top of my head.
Well, now, you said you did move to the Brethren home.
Yes.
You want to say
I
anything
moved-
about were you involved
was-
in the early days of planning that?
I was on the board of directors, the original board of directors. And so I've kind of joked and said I had no choice when it came to that. I had to go there.
Oh, but it's a lovely place to live.
We moved there a little over 7 years ago. And my wife was there until 5 years, or a little over 5 years ago. She developed pancreatic cancer and later Alzheimer's. And so she was in the health center out there for 6 weeks and then passed away. But I didn't realize it was going on 8 years that I'm out
Did
there
you
already.
It goes fast.
The only mistake we made was we didn't go earlier.
Isn't that the truth? You know, people
Yeah.
hold off and they want to be independent as long as possible, and reality is they could be very independent
Oh,
living
yes.
out there.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the very beginning, if you were on the early board, why was the decision made to develop a retirement community in Palmyra?
Herman Wenger, who lived over here on Chestnut Street, was very instrumental in talking about retirement community, an old folks' home, they would have called it at that point. And a committee was formed to talk about this. And then they got other brethren, Church of the Brethren was involved in it. And I can remember on our early meetings, we met on the second floor of the Levin Valley Bank.
Okay.
And we passed the hat to get enough money to send letters out to other churches and so on to come to a meeting to talk about this. And
And that would have been when, in the 60s or when was it?
Well, we're operating now, I think 25, 27 years out there now.
Okay. How long did it take in the early stages to go from those early meetings until you
Well,
actually dug a spade in?
I'm not sure anymore how long it went, but it went fairly rapidly. Then they, of course, had a committee in which Dad was on that committee to select a site. And of course, the Grubbs said, well, their farm would be available. And so they finally settled on that, but there were a number of sites considered. And they were very generous because each time a payment was made, they returned 10% of it.
Wasn't that nice?
Yeah,
It's really tithing.
yeah. But that's how that got started.
And for me, the adults of Palmyra as I was growing up are now living on the south end of town.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, yeah,
It was a wonderful thing to bring to Palmyra.
yeah.
I commend you and the rest of the people who had that vision.
Well, I said, you talk about miracles. To me, that is one. The way it all came about. Starting from nothing. Now they're, I guess, approaching 500.
Is that how many they have?
Yeah. And all levels of care, which really is an asset.
Well, and that makes it the true community, when you
Right.
have the total
Right.
continuum of
Yeah.
care. So, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. Thanks for coming and sharing your story. Thanks for the contributions that you gave to Palmyra through the years in your many
Mhm.
businesses and civic actions.
It was my pleasure to be here and talk with you.
Good, thank you. That's what we hope when we invite people to come in. Start over again, and I'll ask you each to say your name and how you came to Palmyra. In your case, you were born here, but you can talk again about why you came to Palmyra and so forth, and then we'll just go on from there. We'll talk about a number of things. So, Fran, maybe you want to start. So, state your name loud and clear so that we can get it on tape.
I'm Frances Kreiser, and I've lived in Palmyra all my life. So I've enjoyed the community very much. I had a mother that was very active in the community, and my husband and I have been very active also in the community.
Let's say who your mother was.
My mother was Sarah A. Sievers.
And she was a scout leader.
She was a scout leader, a registered nurse. She took care of Milton Hershey. She worked part-time at the Hershey factory, also the Hershey Park, and the Hershey Hospital.
Well, the reason I wanted you to state that is earlier today we talked with Charlie Reed, who wrote a book about the women who developed Palmyra, the women who were influential in the development of Palmyra. And your mother, I'm sure, was one of them. He didn't mention specific names, but when I think of that concept of the women who had a strong influence on Palmyra, I think of your mother, because she was my scout leader, and she was very active and influential in the lives of many people.
Yes.
And you are her husband, and you are?
I am Roy Kreiser, Fran's husband, yes, for 55 years in February, and not less than a month, yes, thank you. That's why I have no hair, no set.
Okay. But you have other facial hair, so it makes up for it.
Right. I just wanted to say one thing here, quick, jumping around with Dick. You were talking to Dick there about the nursing home back here. I was fire chief when that was built.
Okay.
And we made many a trip out there getting the alarm system down pat, And there was a little old lady in one room. I don't remember her name. But the alarm went off one night around midnight. So we had to run out there to the nursing home. And I figured it was somewhere around her room. So I sent everybody else around and checking the area. And I went to her room. And sure enough, it was her alarm, Well, she was out in the hallway. They had to get out of the room. But I went in and looked, and sure enough, it was her room, her alarm. And when it came out, she said to me, "Was it my alarm?" And I said, "Yes, it was." Well, she swore, son of a gun,
Yeah.
And she came out and she said, just like that, son, but not that word. But,
Yeah.
She says, "I swear a lot," she says, "but I pray a lot also."
Had she pulled it accidentally? or-
No, just went off of either a
Oh.
bug or a piece of dirt, something got
Oh.
in there, and set it off. But, she was quite a gal, yeah.
Well, that they've done they've given a home to people of Palmyra through the years. And other people live there from other areas. But I know, as I said to him, it seems to me the people that were the adults as I was growing up, have now moved to the Brennan home. And it has, created a new community out there for those individuals. And I think they really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's interesting that with the fire, having worked in a retirement community, with the fire department, you were integrally related. And any time that alarm does go off, that creates extra problems for the fire company. Because most times they are accidental and it's not a fire, thankfully, but you need you need to respond.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Was there any animosity when they decided to build that the fire company went, "Oh no, now we're going to have this"? Oh, that's great.
No, in fact, I don't know that we went one way or the other,
It was just part of the job.
For the job, exactly. Yeah.
Well, while we're on the fire company, tell us about your experiences with the Palmyra Fire Company.
I joined the company in 1952. Lloyd Martin was fire chief. No, I take that back. Dutch Geiger was fire chief then. and had to join as a rookie, you know, couldn't do anything. We carried ladders and loaded hose and things like that. And then as you got older, were a little more, then you got promoted. Then you got to be a lineman, you got up close to a fire, and the next thing you know, you got to be a nozzleman. And that was where the fun was. It was fun for us and not for the people that were involved, but it was fun, and I really enjoyed it. And then 1967, I believe, I became chief for 3 years, and I thought 3 years would be enough for anybody. You know, but, I got out and we had a couple of the fellows went over and then got back in around 1974, somewhere around there, 75 maybe. I was in there for 7 years as chief. Then I retired, and that was it. I didn't go around much, and now I don't know anybody there. But and I must say, we had one of the better fire companies, one of the best fire companies in the area.
Well, I think that's the impression that Palmyra is very proud of their fire
Yes,
company.
absolutely.
All volunteer.
Yeah.
And the fundraising that had to go on through the years
Mm-hmm.
so that they could get the trucks and the ambulances and so forth that they did through the years.
That's right.
It's just wonderful.
And now, in those days, you know, companies that you worked for, your job, your earning, your work, the employer would let you have off when there was a fire. And I worked at Seltzer at the bologna factory, and there was like 5 or 6 of us. When the alarm went, we would run out the door, you know. They never docked us a cent. Jack Seltzer was president of the bologna company, right? And he just said to me one day, he says, just have them get back as soon as you can. We're not going to, you know.
So the town was supportive.
Yes, very much.
Businesses too. That's great.
Yeah, people even got away from Hershey factory during the fair. Now, probably Hershey, and I shouldn't say this, but I would imagine they just let people that belong to Hershey company go, and I don't really know
Yeah,
that.
I don't know either.
I would think.
What, you all carried beepers, so that's how you know.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Were there significant fires during the time that you were involved?
Yeah, right over here, the big one I could think of is the bowling alley.
That where the livery stable had been? That
Yeah,
one? Okay, the apartments that were.
Right. That burned down to the ground and had metal roof on it. Couldn't get out, you know. That started a grease fire in the kitchen, the restaurant in the front.
Oh,
The Greystone Manor, yes, that was their, I don't remember his name, but Schneider died in there.
that's what we heard. Earlier,
Yeah.
someone was talking about that. She had actually been a resident there
Mm-hmm.
before the fire took place.
Yep. I remember they would crawl down into a corner between 2 dressing rooms
Oh,
and try to get away from it, but couldn't make it.
didn't know how big it was going to be.
Yeah, it was all smoke. We just got a call to investigate the building, you know. And it was a Saturday night, we were running bingo. So our trucks were up at the quarry, up at the west end of town. So somebody, the drivers all went up there to get the trucks and, you know, to investigate. It was a worker. It had gas fired and it was gone, yeah. And it was cold. It was
Mhm,
cold.
I
We're
heard.
talking weather like this. It was
So those of you were involved in some of the most significant fires in
Mhm,
town.
yeah, we had. quite a few. I was assistant chief. My sister lived down in Beano. And she had 4 children, 5 children. And they lived in one of those houses out there.
Mhm.
And I had gone out one time and helped her husband put new ceiling in the house. When I came home, I told Fran, I said, if they get a fire there, I said, they're not going to get out.
Mm.
It wasn't long after that they had a car there, and my sister didn't want to cut out. Frank, her husband, told her to jump out the window and go around the back, they'll throw the kids out to her. Well, that didn't work, you know. As soon as they left there, it just blew up.
Oh, my goodness. that's sad.
Totally wrong. My dad was the chief engineer of the company. He was
So
driving.
you were all right there?
Yeah, we were there. Yes. That was bad, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, my goodness.
I won't
How is
describe
that?
it.
No, that's-
It was bad.
Oh, it's a shame.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Mhm.
You mentioned seltzers. Do you want to tell us a little bit about seltzers? How long you
Okay.
worked there? And I mean, that was a prominent business
Mhm,
in
yeah.
Elmira. It still is.
Still is, yeah. They're going good. I started here in 1953. I started at the top. One of the few places you can start at the top. Of the smokehouse. And then over the years, I worked my way inside, you know, into the warm, loading trucks, and got to be assistant plant manager. And then, I don't know when I retired in 1996. For 2 years I was production manager before I retired. And 5 years prior to that, I was the plant manager. So I think I worked my way out. We started
Yeah.
out, worked down, worked back up again, yeah. And it was very good. They were very good to their employees. They really were. And families, yeah. They took us on a trip one time to Florida. Jack leased 2 jet planes and loaded us all up, the employees, the families, children, the whole works, you know,
Oh, my
Took us
goodness.
down
Wasn't
there.
that generous?
to Disney World for the day.
So everybody went down for one day and
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
came back.
Flew down.
We gave each $10
Yeah,
plus admission to the
really neat.
That is. I've
Yeah.
never heard that story. Thanks for
Oh,
sharing that.
yeah.
It was wonderful. You don't hear this?
When was that?
Oh,
Like in the
my.
60s, 70s?
Kids were born 59, 61, and 62. So it would have had to have been in the late 60s, I'm going to say. Yeah.
How wonderful.
That
Oh, that is neat.
Yeah.
Well, how many people was that? Hundreds? With all the families in it?
Oh, yeah. I would think maybe a little more than 100. Yeah. Now I would think that they might have 60 employees. So at that time we had maybe a little more.
Hmm.
And the kids and everything, you know.
Oh, the machinery has changed too, in the
Oh,
sectors, so that decreased
The number of people that they would
Yeah.
need, you know.
cultivation.
But that was neat. Yeah.
That's a great story. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You know, I've been on the road, I've been on traveling and seeing the Seltzer's bologna truck, because you can, because they have the big
Yeah.
Seltzer bologna on the side.
Right.
Many different places in this country, you know what I mean? How
Yeah.
far west do they go? Do they go past the Mississippi or?
No, not driving, no. Anything like that we would ship. But we do ship bologna to, I say we, I'm not there anymore, obviously, but to California. And naturally, that's his father, but when we send it overseas, all the time, yeah. And that they had government standards in for that, you know, you had to pass. Couldn't do this, couldn't do that, but a lot of money was sent overseas.
Little Carolina.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And Ohio, states around here, you know, are all big bologna states. And Seltzers is probably the biggest, I would think.
And what is the proper title today?
It's,
Yeah, Palmyra
Our
Bologna.
bologna company incorporated.
yeah, and we always call it Seltzers.
Right,
Yeah,
so did I, as you know, as growing
the
up.
brand name, yeah.
Well, they have been very generous to the 250th anniversary.
Oh, good.
That to go and take.
Good.
They have been wonderful.
Good.
They filled our refrigerator here with bologna constantly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, they've given for prizes and
Okay.
different supporting events and so
Yeah.
forth. So they're still very generous and continue to be. And the people that I met that work there today seem very positive about the company as well. So it's a nice thing for Palmyra that that's happened through the years. Well, Fran, tell us about your child rearing and your work experiences in Palmyra, and then I want you to tell us a little bit about what happened in 1960 and how you were involved in that anniversary.
Oh, okay. Well, I went to school here at Palmyra all my life, graduated from Palmyra, and that's, of course, my husband went a few years to Palmyra, then went to Hershey for a few years, came back, and then we graduated, and I went off to nursing school, and I graduated from Polyclinic in Harrisburg, which is no longer there, and that's sad, but anyway, it was a wonderful training school at that time. It was a 3-year course that we took. But anyway, this guy decided in 1956 to ask me to marry him, and this coming February the 11th, we'll be married 55 years. We have 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren.
You're too young.
And my birthday is February 10th.
Oh, my goodness.
yes, don't forget
One
Roy's
day we're
birthday.
married.
Oh, so, well, then after nursing school, I worked at Polyclinic for 4 years, and then I was married, and was before those 4 years, 56 we were married. I graduated in 55, so 56 we were married, and then I worked 4 years, and then we started having a family, and so I had 3 children, and they came pretty close, so I didn't do any nursing at that time, other than I did part-time school nursing in Palmyra and Annville School District, and at that time, the nurses didn't take off a lot. They were very dedicated. Back then, I just think we had such dedicated people. I don't see that as much today, but I'm sure there still are dedicated people, but that's what makes things go. But I think years ago, even as you can see it in your neighborhood, neighbors aren't as friendly as they were years ago. But you know, it's only what you make your neighborhood. If you step out and introduce yourself and just talk to them when you see them, it just makes it a friendlier neighborhood. So then, in between, while I was at home with my 3 children, I did do some Girl Scouting. I had a brownie troop for 5 years, and then I went on just to help as a troop on the troop committee when my girls advanced. 2 daughters advanced on to the higher level of scouting. But my mother, she was in Girl Scouting for 25 years as a leader.
And I was one of her little
Oh, you
brownies.
were-
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Oh,
nice,
yes.
Kathy, that's wonderful. Yes, my mother did many wonderful things. And let's see. Well, then I also was in Junior Women's Club for many years until, well, I moved over to Senior Club, but then Junior Club did disband, and then later on, the Senior Club even disbanded.
So tell us a little bit about that, because the fact that we no longer have a women's club at Palmyra, you know, shows sort of like the
Well, I think what happened,
transition.
we had a very active Junior Women's Club, and at that time, mothers weren't working like they do today, and that made a big difference. Because mothers now, they come home from work, they have other things they must do, they can't be out doing social clubs, and so.
What were some of the things that the club did for Palmyra? Weren't they active in the beginning of the library?
Yes,
Can you
yes.
talk about that a
Started the library, and I worked there. That's one nice thing. My husband was always so busy with the Farrer Company and his work. I always had one night a week that I could do what I wanted to do. And so the library, I went over there to help at the library once a month. And then I belonged to Junior Women's Club, and that was on a Thursday night, so that was another night out. Then I also belonged to a Pinochle Club, and I'm still in that Pinochle Club today. And let's see what else. Today, we're active in our church.
Okay.
So we do a lot. Right now, I'm president of the 50-plus group at our church.
Good.
Rory's the secretary.
Oh, you're the secretary?
Well,
But you know, they're telling me that they can't get leadership for the senior groups. So I'm really glad that you're taking leadership, because some of the older people, say who are 20 years older than you are, have done that, you know, and they want to have some relaxation now. But they do want to have the groups. They do want to have the socialization. So that's great that you're taking that role.
but in our
Okay.
church, Trinity Church, we've hit many little obstacles along the way. And so right now, we don't have a lot of youth. So now if the older people in the congregation don't step up and do these things, who's going to do it? So really, that's where we are. And we're trying to rebuild. We're still waiting at Trinity Church, Trinity United Church of Christ, for a full-time pastor. And that's in the process. Right now, we've had some interim pastors.
Okay.
And so we're hoping that we find the right one and they can help our church, you know, to grow.
Right.
But we are thinking ahead all the time. We're thinking more on the contemporary. That seems to be how you draw people into churches today. If you look at the big churches that are out there today, it's the contemporary services where people are going to.
Right, except let me say,
Okay.
having been involved with seniors for 30-some years, the seniors sort of got pushed aside in the churches, you know, and seniors don't necessarily like contemporary. And I always
Right.
contend that there should be churches that are looking, and it sounds to me like you're headed in that direction a little bit, but churches should be catering to seniors. Should be, you know, that there should be a senior church. There was one in Campbelltown, and the pastor has passed away now. That one little church in Campbelltown, he started the senior ministry. And in fact, he would have services on Wednesdays, I think it was. But he drew up from a big area because the seniors were hungry for some spiritual growth, and they were feeling pushed aside because, you know, the churches were going contemporary and trying to get all the young people in, which in the long run, to have a church stay for a long period of time, yes, you're going to need some young families and so forth. But it was at the expense of the senior population. So I just
true.
Yeah.
say that because it's a pet peeve of mine.
It's tougher for the seniors to make changes,
Mhm.
like
Yes.
this contemporary stuff, you know, and that hurts. But hey, we go with it.
But as we're planning, you know, I say you're thinking temporary, but in time, we will come back to 2 services. We did have 2, but our congregation did go down.
Mhm.
And so with the economy, they were thinking that way, we just can't afford 2 services. And this way, with 1 service, you've got to know everyone.
Right, well, and that was part of what happened with many of the churches. It's not
Yes.
just yours. You know, they all went to 2 services for growth, and then in our church, I go in Lebanon, and they still say, well, you know, we don't know that person, because evidently we don't go to that service that they do. So maybe that was a good move to do, was going back to 1 service, so you get some sense of family or sense of congregation there too.
Uh-huh.
Well, best wishes on that.
Well, thank you.
I mean, that Palmyra is rich in church history.
Yes,
You know, we
we
have a
are.
lot of these churches,
Very fortunate.
and the UCC church used to be right here on the corner, you know, of Main Street. And I remember when they moved back there, it became Trinity, and now we're on the Y and so forth. So, you know, there are a lot of changes that have taken place in the churches.
This is where we got married.
Right next door,
Right
yeah.
next door here, yeah. And then
Beautiful church.
we got married in February, and October then I was drafted of the same year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so Frank was chief
By
cook
yourself.
and bottle walker, yeah. They sent me over to Korea. I enjoyed it, I don't know if Fran did or not.
Well, that's when she was nursing.
That's when I was
No, she
working.
was, yeah,
Yeah,
right,
was
yeah,
full-time
she
nursing,
working,
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
But,
so that worked out.
yeah, it was neat.
Well, I want to tell you something that just happened recently. We have a grandson that was just recently inducted into the Palmyra High School Hall of Fame, Travis Risser.
How exciting.
And my husband was asked to present the plaque to Travis because Roy's also a member of the Sports Hall of Fame.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm
Yeah.
glad you did. Tell us a little bit about that Palmyra Sports Hall of Fame and how that got started? And, I mean, it's not that old, is it?
No, not really. I was inducted in '97, and I think it was, might have been started 3 or 4 years prior to
So
that.
just in the 90s, okay.
Yeah,
And they honor, what type of qualifications do you have to have to
yeah.
be?
You have to be out of school 7 years. And then from there on, you send in a resume and they vote on them. Now this year, for instance, this year now we voted on 7 people out of 11.
Okay. And this is sports hall of fame?
This is sports,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
All the sports, the coaches, and then 5 are inducted. At this point, they're inducting 5 every year.
Wasn't that exciting to have a grandson?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Another
then
nice,
Stacy, I think, is going to be going in a couple of years.
his sister.
You know,
Okay.
yeah. So,
And what was he active in? What sports was he active in? Your grandson?
3, football, baseball, and basketball.
And you did the same? You were 3 sports?
Yeah, I was involved in track also. Yeah, it was fun.
Oh, I bet.
Really
See, to
fun.
me,
Yeah.
the extracurricular is what helps you have a wonderful
Oh,
Yeah.
school experience.
Right.
I really do. I think
Mhm.
that's what gets the kids through. And, you know, unfortunately, people don't understand that, and school districts sometimes, you know, are not funding those programs, whether it's music programs or theater or whatever. So that's neat.
Now it's harder with the money, you know.
Yeah.
Schools can't afford all this stuff now.
Well, now, does the Palmar Sports Hall of Fame do anything back for the school? I mean, do you serve as mentors or anything like that?
No.
That'd be neat, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
It'd be a neat thing to do, to
On the
encourage
walls, they
it.
have everything, people that scored 1,000 points in basketball, for instance, in their career, they would have their names up on the wall.
Right,
Right?
And all those
That's
that
neat.
entered the Hall of Fame is on the hall.
Yeah.
in that hallway. I'll have to go back and see
It,
that.
not the hallway, in the gym.
Oh, it's actually in the
Yeah,
gym?
in the gym.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Mhm.
Well, my little ones will be up in not yet, but in about 6 years, they'll be up in the high school, so
There you go.
I'll get in the gym more then.
And we're very fortunate, Travis also scored over 1,000 points in basketball.
Mhm.
Oh, really?
And so they have a board just for the ones that reach that plateau.
I bet that was fun for you going to all those games.
Oh,
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
I know what that's
Yeah.
like.
And Travis is still playing baseball, independent ball, out in Avon Lake, Ohio,
Okay.
for the Lake Erie Crushers,
That's,
as a starting pitcher.
So that's his profession at this point.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Great.
Mhm.
16 miles west of Cleveland
Yeah.
is where his team is.
That's a nice area. My son lived in Cleveland for a while.
Oh.
I like that area.
Okay.
Very nice. Well, I want to thank you for coming. Anything else you want to share? So these stories keep coming out here. That's great.
I'm sure as we walk out the door. we'll
You'll think of more.
Yes,
That's
I
great.
know.
Well, you should do like Charlie Reed did. He started writing them down. So
Oh,
I
okay.
encourage you to do that in your retirement. Write
Okay.
some of these stories of Palmyra. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years we'll have an essay contest or something instead of doing our DVD.
Yeah.
All I can say, Palmyra's been a wonderful place to live. We've enjoyed it. We've been active too.
Right. Well, it's just like you said about the neighborhoods, you know.
Yes.
If you're going to be, if you want good neighbors, then you have to be a good neighbor.
That's
So if you want to have a wonderful community, you need to be active.
Right.
Junior Women's Club, Fire Company, whatever. You need to be active and share that. And that's how you get to know people, and that's how you get to help the community grow.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks for
Thank
all.
you.
And thanks for coming back.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Oh, my gosh.
This
Yeah,
worked
no
out
problem.
great.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.